Professor, good afternoon to you and welcome. Vincent Smith from the ANC saying at a briefing a little earlier on this afternoon that this entire process, and I quote, has addressed the original sin in a comprehensive way. Does he have it smack on the button? Is he right? Was this the right process?
Not quite. I think as the high-level panel of Parliament under Kgalema Motlanthe pointed out, this question of expropriation and compensation is a bit of a red herring. Unfortunately, the ANC, the EFF, and Parliament have swallowed that fish, and they've been struggling to digest it. And as a result, we have a slightly problematic outcome. Not one that's disastrous, but one that I think has really been, not talking about the major problems facing land reform. So there, I think the opposition does have a bit of a point.
In what way, then, is it problematic, and how does one navigate through that in order to achieve some sort of parity that will satisfy a multiplicity of constituencies?
Look, the question of expropriation without compensation has raised the alarm bells for investors, both locally and abroad, and property owners more generally. And that is justified because an expropriation is a major undertaking, and it has to be justified. And without parameters, without clear parameters, it can, in fact, endanger security and investment in society. However, if we are talking about the existing constitution and its provisions, which do allow expropriation and probably allows for expropriation with very little compensation, then I think it is bounded. It is within containable parameters, and I think land reform can proceed, society can proceed. So I think the key issue has been around the parameters. And that's what the debate has been around in relation to the Constitution. I think what's interesting, Jeremy, about the public statements made by the Constitutional Review Commission, I think that they're suggesting that there's quite a lot of agreement that if there is to be an amendment, it will be a relatively minor clarificatory amendment, suggesting that it be explicit and clear that in some cases, according to defined criteria, there may be no compensation paid. But it is definitely not signaling that this will be opening the floodgates to large-scale expropriation on a very large scale and without due process, without examining each case on a case-by-case basis. I don't think there's any indication there. So I think there's been a lot of politics around this, and it's rather obscured the core legal issues and, as I said earlier, distracted us from the major challenges facing land reform policy.
I suppose the politics was inevitable when it comes to a debate like this, but maybe two issues that haven't been answered. One is exactly, and again, assuming this process is going to move with some degree of speed, certainly as the ruling party is suggesting. One is the identification of land, and then the quantifiable number of people that might benefit from it. Have we thought that far through the process?
I don't think we have to date. I don't think policy is very clear about these precise issues at all. And it's clear that for land reform to succeed, we have to target both land and beneficiaries much more carefully, much more precisely than we have. So I think here there's a key role for the President's advisory panel and possibly a need for a new white paper on land to guide policy making. These have been key confusions in the past. And whether, I think the key point is that whether or not we allow some expropriation without compensation, expropriation can never be the major way in which land gets acquired and transferred through land reform. In certain cases where negotiations break down, expropriation can break the impasse and allow the transfer to take place. But on a large scale, I think most land acquired for land reform will have to be through negotiated purchases, possibly below market value in many instances, in some cases well below market value, but negotiated purchases are the way to do land reform relatively quickly on a large scale.
While you're suggesting and perhaps hoping that we navigate a central path through all of this, should we get more committees discussing it? Should we be looking at the formulation of another white paper? There is, Professor, also a disaffected, angry constituency that is saying this has got to move a whole lot quicker. Again, the longer the delay, the more problems are going to be caused.
Yes, and I think it's unlikely that the amendment will take place before the election. So this will be an issue looming large over the election. And yes, I think you're absolutely right. In particular, young people are very disaffected. They're calling for a much speeded up land reform process. And I think, in fact, they're correct. It does need to be speeded up. What's important and what's really needed, I think, in the present time is strong political leadership. The president has many issues on his plate. I don't think he can personally provide all the leadership here. So I think we need urgently to appoint very strong people to guide this process. And I do think we need a white paper process so that society can agree not only on how to get the land, but who it should go to, for what purposes, with what rights, and how we will support that. That requires a rethink of policy. And I think one of the things I'm hoping the presidential panel will recommend is a rigorous but quite quick white paper process to take place immediately after the election next year.
Professor, thank you very much.